Hey, what's up, guys? It's Oakley, and we are coming back to dive into Warhammer news. I have with me Grey Hunter and Arch Warhammer. They both have their own separate channels, and I'll start with Arch. I guess you can just talk a little bit about your channel, and then Grey Hunter, I'll let you discuss your channel really briefly as an introduction.
Hello, I am Arch. I run a Warhammer related lore channel with occasional Warhammer related Let's Plays.
I am Grey Hunter. I kind of did the opposite. I started out with Let's Plays and then moved on to Warhammer lore. Yay!
So yeah, we've been using these guys, if you don't know, as basically the go-to lore experts. They know a lot about Warhammer, and with the recent influx of news on Warhammer, we figured we'd kind of dive into this. So we've gone over the images in a previous video, but now I just wanted to discuss a couple of points that people have been kind of picking out of I think it was the PC Gamer article. So I'm just going to read through a couple of those, and we'll get some reactions and sort of discuss some of the details of this. So the first couple, well, we'll start with the first point, I guess. It says the Griffins are able to pick up orcs and throw them from the air. So that seems to be kind of in line with what they've been saying. A lot of the character models, like giants and trolls, seem to be able to do massive amounts of damage, and they've been trying to seem, I don't know, make things. I don't know, how do you describe this?
It does promise a greater degree of interaction, I suppose,
I
more
think
cinematic combat.
that's the best word. I think the interaction of the different armies, because right now all we've had basically up to now is the biggest interaction you have is a cavalry charge, and besides that, it's just infantry grinding it out. We've never really had interaction like this, which is it's gonna be weird.
The idea that monstrous creatures will be monstrous. I love that. I love the idea that, you see that griffin coming straight at you. It's not just, ooh, look at the pretty thing. It's, oh my god, it's coming straight for me. It's going to eat up this unit alive. Please no.
Yeah, so that's in line with
And
the.
giants?
Yeah, exactly. The giants. They said. I
Mm-hmm.
think they said that they in one of the magazines that they will eat your units, which
I hope so.
we'll see. I mean, they did have that animation in Rome 2 where the elephant could pick someone up with his trunk, so they've shown that they can do that. It was a really rare animation, but I guess it wouldn't be too hard to make that model go into a mouth and then have it disappear.
The interaction from a modeling standpoint would be relatively easy to make. The interaction from a coding standpoint, however, could be a proper bastard. Because you're essentially deleting one entity and creating two others that work in sync in an animation, then deleting that unit. I expect a few visual bugs, but I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It sounds ambitious,
Right.
but if they can do it, that's amazing. And I will give them all of the money. If they can do it.
Yeah, it's a big if. And then I guess the next point they mention here, which is much more doable, is that the vampire armies are immune to fear. That's something we kind of anticipated before with the undead. They're going to be the ones instilling fear, and I think on the tabletop, right? They don't suffer from like a leadership test or anything like that.
The vast majority
No,
of
they
them
don't
don't. They
generally.
do suffer from leadership, as in if the vampire general gets killed, they have to take a
Yeah.
leadership test or they crumble because the magic binding them is dissolved and everything.
But in the usual sense of morale, no. No, they don't have to worry about
They
fear
have
and
a
terror.
handful of human-ish units. Now, do correct me on this because I'm not that much of a vampire player, but do the ghouls have morale, since they're technically debased humans?
Not in the sense of are we panicked? Should we run? It's again the reanimation thing. So vampire general is dead. Nobody's taken up the mantle. What do we do? Do we stay in existence or do we just kind of drop dead for really reals?
Okay, so that could be a new mechanic where, okay, you can't get through to these guys on the front lines because they're never going to break. They're going to just grind to the end. So maybe you want to go assassinate their leader, and then the whole thing falls apart.
Well, that's how it seems to me. It seems to me that vampire armies will be very strong in that they cause terror, they are immune to morale in most instances, but you won't have the ability to use your general as like a cavalry reserve. You'll have to kind of make sure that he's in the center so everyone can keep moving.
Yeah,
And if he dies, have fun,
right.
because you won't have an army.
Great, and then you clean up afterwards. So that's probably why in your armies you're going to want to have some non-undead units just in case that does happen, so something's left after your army disintegrates.
Pretty
It is the
much.
vampire counts, so it wouldn't be out of the ordinary, really, to see Empire state troops.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure Manfred does have a. Are they called the Drakenhof Guard? Because he has a unit of Empire Halberdiers as his personal guards, I believe.
I think so, but I can't remember if that's current lore or not. It might not be.
All right.
But they definitely do have humans living in the area that we would identify with the vampire counts in the Warhammer Total War game, from what we've seen so far.
Right, and then I think we can always expect mercenaries for the different factions. Um,
One would hope so.
yeah, yeah, just to round off different
They've
factions.
got so much stuff to draw from in that regard. One would hope they take advantage of it.
Yeah, and that touches on, I guess, the next point that they have here, which says they said there are going to be minor races in the game, which we don't quite know where the map is, so that could be either way.
Yeah,
But we
it's
discussed, chaos is definitely going to be in the game. I think someone snuck an image of like an art guy working on some models in the bottom right hand corner. You saw some outlines of units that look like chaos. So if there's going to be chaos, that means the north. If we have empire, that means you're going to have the land between empire and the north. So presumably we have Kislev.
And another
would
interesting
make
thing,
sense.
there was in the image you were talking about, there was what appeared to be a phoenix, which is a high elf creature. So maybe
Huh.
expeditions contingent, like maybe an army of high elves or something along those lines. You get lent a few units, stuff like that.
If chaos is included as kind of like the big boogeyman, as it were, it might make sense for the high elves to have a kind of in, as their whole reputation in the game is basically they've been fighting chaos the longest. They like to say that to everybody because they're very, very arrogant people. And so whenever chaos rears its ugly head, they're like, "Oh, hang on, guys, we got this. Don't you worry. We're coming. We're coming to save you." So hopefully they'll be included as kind of a relief force thing.
Huh. That would be actually really interesting because they've had end time doom stacks. I don't think they've ever had a counter to doom stacks, like a savior force. Hmm.
Well, they haven't really done proper Doomstone. Like the worst is what the Timurids who spawned with 8 stacks. Like you can handle that. Chaos Invasion would be like in Call of Warhammer, where there literally pops up fucking 30 of the bastards.
Jeez.
Yep, that's not fun. If you're in the north, you are officially fucked when that happens.
All right. So I guess speaking of the North and weather, I'll read the quote that people are posting here. Basically, the gist of it says that there's no season, no weather. So this is a quote from the article. So it says, Andy Hall explains that though turns pass, no real time does. There isn't even weather. It's like living in a perfect instant of Warhammer. And then this is a quote within the quote that you guys will probably debate, saying there aren't seasons in Warhammer World anyway. So I guess you guys can debate that there are, right? And I've heard a lot of people saying, wait, hold on a second, don't the Wood Elves have seasons within their realm and all that stuff?
Yeah, they
Yep.
kind of
I
do.
honestly, this quote is really strange because he goes on to say, "One day it's raining teeth, the next the sun's under the sea." No, unless you're hardcore into the Chaos Waste, that doesn't actually happen.
Yeah, unless you're tripping on Slanesh's finest brew, those things aren't occurring all that often.
Yeah, so there are seasons. It's a normal Terran type world for the most part when it comes to, the seasons. There are summer, there's winter, there's autumn, spring, and of course the odd magical abhorrents like the Wood Elves of Athaloran that have all four because, well, magic.
These things do happen. And there are seasonal things in the lore, like specific. They have months. They have months and festivals and such. If you look at some of the in-depth background lore,
Right. And then you guys were
why
saying
bother? You know,
this may be some behind the scenes legal stuff happening.
well, one of the gods in the Empire is the god of wolves and winter.
Oh, right. So
If
that's
there's no
never going to happen.
seasons, yeah, if
You
there's
would
no
think that'd be a
seasons,
hint.
Ulrich would like a word.
I'm not entirely sure what this quote is. I assume it's either they have just completely pulled something straight out of their ass and invented a completely new continuity where one of the chaos gods just went fuck it and just deleted the seasons would be odd. Or it might have just been an unguarded quote. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
I hope that I may be wrong, but what I suspect is that Games Workshop said, well, you're not allowed to advance the timeline. And they went, hang on, what? What do we do with that then? And Games Workshop went, well, we just sold you the IP, so we're washing our hands of this one, guys.
Hmm.
You figure it out. And this was
Or
the solution.
yeah, or potentially we are just looking at Creative Assembly going like, well, we sold you seasons partially in Rome 2 with Caesar, so that worked.
Or even more cynically, we'll just let the modders do it after it comes out. It's cool, right? Yeah, awesome.
Next step is paid modding for Warhammer Total War. Oh, good gracious.
Let's hope not. So
Don't tempt them.
a little point we jumped over was that they say here diplomacy has some constraints due to Warhammer factions relations. That's something we knew and we commented out in the geopolitics videos. I don't expect various factions to work together. The orcs with various others. Basically, the only ones you would see working together would be the human or human-like characters, and then maybe even the dwarves sometimes. So they're noted. They're saying that basically here. It's what we expected.
A lot of it will depend on who's included as minor races.
Yeah.
Because the High Elves will work with the Empire, say. So if they're included, there's a few more extra people that you could work with. But it would be strange to have anyone working with the orcs or anyone working actively with the vampires.
Well, the vampires,
So
you could make the excuse that they're manipulating people, and the orcs,
maybe.
uh, you could make the very shaky argument that they might be able to work together with night goblins or possibly chaos dwarves. It's shaky, to say the least, but yeah.
So then, if they have
I
said there's going to be
guess.
minor factions, and the fact that they say diplomacy is a little iffy, then it would seem to indicate that okay, if they want to beef up diplomacy and they're going to be minor factions, maybe they want those minor factions to be within the realm of diplomacy. So that probably means KISLEV, which we already mentioned. So I think KISLEV will probably most likely be in. If there's a Chaos North, plus they want diplomacy to be a thing, then they're going to bring in human characters and human factions that are actually going to have reasonable diplomacy. So I would say Kislev is probably, I don't know, I think there's a fair bet.
I hope so. Who doesn't like bear riding Russians? Come on. What's not to love there?
Right. And it's got a bunch of the character models already.
And ice magic. Come on. Come on. You know that's cool.
So then I guess we can move on to the last point, which is going to be legendary heroes and lord characters. So these are two things. Basically, what they say here in the quote that people are pulling off the PC Gamer magazine is that each race has 1 to 2 legendary heroes, and these cannot die. And then each race thereafter kind of has lord characters, which are lower than legendary heroes. These guys won't age, but they can die. And I think we talked a little bit about this, but these guys basically they function like agents, which have deep skill trees and all that stuff. They can have quests for mounts, gear, and all that stuff. But actually, they can go on the battlefield as well.
Which just sounds cool.
Right.
That
Very
sounds
interesting
amazing.
mechanic.
Yeah.
It depends on how they would work. Like, because currently you can't stack, for example, 2 spies. Could I have 2 wizard lords in my army, or can I only have one?
Yeah, arbitrary limits is the one thing that I look at this and go, ugh.
You kind of have to limit them though, because with how potent they were in Rome 2, like they must have figured out that that was a bad idea. All the
That's
same.
true. I just don't like arbitrary limits in general, to be quite honest here.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Like,
I can only
honestly,
have
do
one of
they
each
need that
guy.
though? Do they really need agents that interact with armies that much? I mean, what are you going to do against an orc horde? Are you going to sneak in there as a human and poison their water well? Are the orcs even going to give a shit if you poison their water well? Like, as a
No, but if
mage,
I
maybe
could
you could
have,
throw some fireballs in there, sure, but
uh, if I could have, 4 warrior priests of Sigmar beefing up my line, I'd be pretty pleased with that.
oh yes.
Right. So we discussed before maybe these guys being the three main agent types that we've seen in recent iterations, be that being sort of the priest, a warrior type or champion, and then probably a spy or assassin. And I think they'll probably stick to that formula. And so we discussed that kind of fits into a little bit of the Warhammer lore. So I think for Empire, you guys were saying that would be witch hunters, warrior priests, and stuff like that. And then maybe they have some assassin types they could call on or spy types.
Well, the witch hunter would be the spy slash assassin, I'd assume.
Probably, yeah. The idea being, like they don't have an assassins guild as such. Like some races do have assassins dedicated to killing other people, like the Skaven and the Dark Elves do. For the Empire, not so much. The
They could
dwarves
serve
don't
the same
either.
purpose. The
Yeah.
dwarves don't like that because, dishonorable.
What might the dwarves have then for their lord characters, you think?
Rune
Runesmith?
Priest,
Yeah.
Thane, and they don't really like spies in general because, dishonorable again.
Yeah, I can't see them having a spy analog.
So what is the rune guy? The runesmith?
Basically like a wizard. Arch could explain it better.
Yeah, just since we're trying to keep this a little bit on the reasonable side of time,
Yes.
he's a wizard.
Briefly.
He does use magic, but he uses it in the form of runes rather than just pulling magic from the forces of the ether, the warp, the winds of magic, and all of that.
And they use massive anvils.
Hmm.
What they could do, though, potentially, is with the whole dwarf's greed for gold and stuff, they could have a different type of agent along the lines of a merchant from a medieval 2, for example.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That could
Because that
work.
would fit their lore much better than a spy, at least.
Hmm.
For the vampire counts, I see potentially they'd just have representatives from different bloodlines. So for the champion, you'd have a blood dragon because blood dragons, their whole bloodline is dedicated to getting good at fighting. For the spy, you'd have a Lamian because their whole thing is spying, basically, in the lore. For the wizard, there's not really a particular bloodline for that. I guess maybe you'd go for the Necrocs, maybe.
Necrocs would work. They like the whole magic studying thing, so
Yeah, but
it would be
it's a
better than
little
the
weird
Strigoi.
because there's some factions that just wouldn't fit into these nice, neat three categories, as we discovered with the dwarves. So
Yes.
Hmm.
it's going to be a little iffy seeing how they do that.
Right, and they seem to be embracing the asymmetry, so there's no reason that they would have to do all, three same types between the factions.
Well, that's true. Dwarves might not have somebody who could assassinate, but they might be somebody. They might replace it with someone who can increase the efficiency of a settlement to balance that out.
Yeah, have the agent selection cater to that sort of faction's play style, as opposed to trying to force each faction to have the same three types. Yeah,
Pretty much.
I think that makes sense. So what about the greenskins? You guys think they might have?
Well,
Shamans for
Shaman.
wizards.
Yeah, Charm for magic, and a nice big black orc for animosity, because they did mention animosity would be a thing if you were too static, so.
For that, just by the way, in the tabletop, when you play as the greenskins, you have to roll on a table called the animosity table. And depending on what you roll, your army might not move at all that turn. It might stay completely still or fight amongst itself because you rolled badly. So I'm hoping that something like that will come along for the greenskins.
Mm-hmm. Because they have mentioned in the past that they're gonna have the war. I think I pronounced that correctly. I don't know, but basically they have that thing, and they said it's gonna be. I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but it seemed like you're gonna be penalized for being at peace, and so these guys are gonna be constantly on the move.
Yeah,
So maybe what you just mentioned about your army freezing up would be a way to prevent them from steamrolling, or some sort of internal, sort of not politics, but an orc politics that you have to manage to keep your. You wouldn't have a settlement that you have to sustain. You wouldn't have population happiness, but you'd have like an army's happiness, and you have to sustain that and keep it moving along to keep doing what you're doing, I guess.
I'm
An
thinking that
animosity meter.
perhaps,
Yeah.
yeah, that too. I'm thinking that perhaps they might have a sort of an infighting mechanic, kind of like animosity, but where the various war bosses in the army, so perhaps other agents, might try to overthrow the faction leader, and cause chaos,
Yeah.
so slows down the movement of the orcs in general.
Because the interesting thing is, the orcs always grow. They grow more the harsher the environment and the tougher the challenge. So being near a orc war boss like Grimgor Ironhide, which they have announced, it should cause essentially every single other orc in his horde to continuously grow to try and catch up to Grimgor. So the power
Yeah.
struggle would be real.
So I guess you just mentioned one of the probably confirmed legendary heroes that would probably have buffs for your army. So you put Grimgor or Ironhide in there, and then he's going to buff your entire army and have it maybe gain experience and stuff like that as well.
The
Yep,
Captain
veterancy.
Amazing for the orcs and goblins.
Mm-hmm.
Grimgor is amazing. Like, he's fantastic. He's such a good fighter that when he went to challenge the dwarves because he'd run out of good people to fight around himself, the Slayer cult, and these guys are dwarves who basically they've dishonored themselves in some way and so seek to die in glorious death. Instead of fighting him, they locked the doors and refused to go out and fight him. He was that much of a beast.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen pictures of him, so that would be interesting to see how they portray him. I think they were saying he's like troll size or just really, really big.
He's huge. Like,
Yep, that sounds about
yeah.
right. Like some of his early minotaurs, I should probably mention this, otherwise we are going to get commented on it. The early minotaurs had him relatively human-sized, but yes, the fluff says that he is one of the biggest orcs to have ever bloody walked the land, bigger than Gorbit Ironclaw. So yes, he should be huge.
And the cool thing about this is they have said your legendary heroes here cannot die. So you would have this character, you'd invest a lot into him, and yeah, maybe he'll get knocked out of the action, but he'll be back on his feet soon enough. So that'll be fun to get these characters. You can level up your Grimgor. Maybe he actually does get physically larger over time, and bring that guy to just stomp through various factions would be really cool to see.
That would be
It would be
fantastic for
fantastic.
the orcs to have a veterancy system like that, where you start out, for example, with Grimgor being small, or a unit of just normal orc boys and growing them through veterancy. Oh, that'd be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You just have a massive unit of orcs towering over everybody else going, right. You see that thing right over there? We're gonna go kill it.
That
It's gonna be awesome.
That is something I would like to see because in previous Total War games, or I guess in the recent ones, when you throw on a chevron of veterancy on your units or even armor, you don't see anything that happens. Back in medieval, they did show off different skins for different amounts of armor, so it'd be cool if they brought that system back to the
I hope
orcs, like
so.
we just mentioned, where give them veterancy and maybe they have better weapons and stuff, but they're maybe physically larger each single one would be really cool.
Yeah.
So okay, those guys are huge orcs. They must be very high veterancy. That would be really cool to see.
I think they're gonna have to add in some kind of armor upgrade because the early screenshots we've seen Empire State Troops wearing suspiciously little armor for Empire State Troops, particularly Empire State Troops from Reichland. They are remarkably naked.
Hmm. So yeah,
I'm
hopefully
wearing conquistador helmets.
that's yeah.
Oddly enough,
I've heard people complaining about that.
It's not that wrong. It's just that sort of imagery is more for Talea and Estalia.
Sure.
it's odd because you have huge libraries. You have a book, I forget its name, but it basically details all of the uniforms and the standard arms and armor of the Empire. Like you have literally a couple hundred pages worth of fluff for this. So
What's
why
it
did you
called?
pull the Conquistador helmet out of your ass?
Yeah, it was called The Uniforms and Heraldry of the Empire, if I remember correctly.
That sounds correct. Yes.
And it was literally just chock full of paint schemes. And this was back in the day where they didn't charge you outrageously for it.
Oddly enough.
Good
I,
times.
I did
Good
want to
times.
comment on something I noticed in the Blackfire Pass video. People had been talking about, hey, can you customize your unit colors? And all the Empire troops were suspiciously the same red color.
Yes, and
Yeah.
suspiciously also a color that's not really in fluff. You could make the argument that they might be Carabao greatswords for the greatswords, but
Yeah. But as you pointed
pure
out to me,
red.
Arch, yeah,
Let's go
it's
ahead.
not black and red, it's red and white.
Yeah, so that color scheme is not as far as I've been able to tell, something that is currently in Warhammer. So hints of an army painter, hopefully.
Or they just painted them all default red, either for now or
Potentially.
hopefully, yeah.
I mean, they look cool, so I guess that'd be a reason.
Hmm. All right, cool. Well, I think we've been rambling enough, and we did kind of talk a little bit about magic briefly. There's a little more we could talk about for that, but I think we concluded in a talk before this video that we would save it
It's
for
a
more
ton of
details
speculation.
because there's just too much speculation. But they have said that on the battlefield map you would be seeing different zones that have different buffs to magic users. I think the winds of magic will somehow be physically represented on the battlefield. But again, we have to see how this works out. So many potential questions and stuff come to mind. So E3 is pretty soon, so hopefully they'll be unveiling a little bit more of that in the future. And
One hopes.
yeah, one hopes.
It's E3. This is the whole
Right,
thing about
they
E3.
gotta blow people away. There's the Fallout news that came out. A lot of people are hyped for that, so they gotta match the hype. Let's hope. All right, cool. Did you guys have anything else
Battle
you
of the
want
Hypest.
to commentate on, or are we good to go?
Uh,
The
oh,
only thing.
actually, yes.
Yes, you go ahead. You first.
Okay.
So,
So I've noticed a lot of the time in the Warhammer forums, people are going, "Hey, how come Manfred's in charge instead of Vlad von Carstein?" Because Vlad's dead, people. Vlad's
and
dead.
has been for a while.
He has been dead for over 200 years at time of the game taking place. I'm sorry to break your hearts, because I love Vlad too, but
Hmm.
he dead.
And Arch,
Yeah, the whole chaos thing, because a lot of people are speculating that chaos will be playable. I hope not, personally, because people might be wondering why we didn't mention chaos as well. Because I think our general consensus that we would prefer NPC as a unified threat to the player rather than as a playable faction.
yeah.
I would like the idea of perhaps you being able to play a secret cultist. Like
Yeah,
you'd have the choice to perhaps endorse the Chaos Gods, but I would not like to be able to play as one of the Northmen
Mm.
from the actual Chaos Wastes. That no. Have it be a threat that's actually credible in the form of AI. That would be good.
Right.
yeah, because if they're playable, they have to be balanced.
Yeah,
And it seems
which they're
like
most decidedly not.
they're already gonna have a hard enough time with that. So don't throw in the the chaos player. Yeah.
Pretty much.
All right. Cool. Well, for more stuff, be sure to check out both of these guys' channels. I'll link them in the description below. They have a lot more about the lore where they can just dive into it. Tons and tons of videos on that, and I'm sure you guys will be updating that with the new information as it drops. So be sure to check those guys out. And anyways, we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. See you.